We now come to a most exciting feature of our existence. And this is what we can entitle when meaning becomes a mission. When our lives, as we search for meaning, becomes a mission, a co-mission, a task. One given to us and given to us uniquely. A task that only we can do. And if we don't fill our space, that space will remain empty forever. We saw that suffering has this effect of bringing us down to the basics, to the why of our existence. And often a crisis in life can bring about an existential turn for the better. That we more keenly realize what it is we want in life and what we want from ourselves in achieving it. And we're far more on the road than ever before. And this is a quote from Frankl that so rivetingly describes it. He says, life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems that we are faced with and to fulfill the task with which it constantly sets for each individual. Life does not mean something vague, but something real and concrete. What is it that I am to do now about this situation that is facing me? We have a choice every day of our lives in determining which way we are going to go. Frankl so strongly stressed we are self-determining creatures. We cannot escape our freedom of choice, and thank God we have a freedom of choice. We can change. And the power of making right choices, because like Frankl said, each situation is like a question. What are we going to do about it? And it has only one answer, the right one. And the right one is always the most moral, the most responsible, even if it is a costly choice. Because, not to take the easy way out or to go for another option that isn't that hard, but to do the one right thing that is required. And if we do it, how powerfully it releases our own power of our human spirit to be more inspired, more determined, more passionate about our lives. Let's look at the power of right choices in the life of Frankl himself. One of the most costly choices he ever made, he said, shortly before the United States entered World War II, I received an invitation to come to the American consulate in Vienna and to pick up my immigration visa, okay? My old parents with whom he was living were overjoyed because they expected that I would soon be allowed to leave Austria. I suddenly hesitated, however. The question beset me. Could I really afford to leave my parents alone to face their fate, to be sent sooner or later to a concentration camp or even to a so-called extermination camp? Where did my responsibility lie? Should I foster my brainchild logotherapy by emigrating to fertile soil where I could write my books? Or should I concentrate on my duties as a real child? The child of my parents, who had to do whatever he could to protect them? It was then that I noticed a piece of marble lying on the table at home. When I asked my father about it, he explained that he had found it on the site where the National Socialists had burnt down the largest Viennese synagogue. He had taken the piece home because it was part of the tablets on which the 10 Commandments were written. And Frankl asked keenly, which commandment? And his father said, the 5th commandment, which was what? Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy life may be long in the land that the Lord God will give you. He said he had his choice. And soon afterwards, he was, with the family, indeed, taken to the concentration camps. What a costly choice. But what did it do? It actually refined, it turned Frankl's life around in a much deeper way. Like he said about losing his manuscript, that he had to interpret that as saying yes to life, to live it in a real way, and not just to write about it, not just to teach about it, but to live it in the way that it should be lived. And this is what he's then, after when he was released from the camps, and he discovered that, in fact, his whole family, with the exception of his sister who had escaped to Australia before the war, were wiped out. He broke down and said this to his friend, I must tell you, when all of this happens to someone, to be tested in such a way that it must have some meaning. I have a feeling, and I don't know how to say it, that something waits for me, that something is expected of me, that I'm destined for something. The final and wonderful thing that I just want to illustrate here when meaning becomes a mission was that this very vision of what he was to do after his release was given to him in the camp. And he described the incident that it was a day when he was thinking about all the miseries of their lives in the camp and how he could possibly relieve some of them. And, would he have a better commander the next day, somebody with more compassion, and would there be a little bit of turnip in his soup that night? And he said he became disgusted with what drew his thoughts and his whole demeanor down to such a level of just sheer existence that he said he forced himself and lifted his spirit, and he then suddenly saw himself standing on a platform of a well-lit auditorium, giving over a lecture on the psychology of the death camps to an audience that sat in comfortably upholstered chairs and listening to him with rapt attention. And in fact, that is what Frankl did. After his book, Man's Search for Meaning, was translated into English and became a bestseller, that he was invited to universities all over the world, and that is what he did. I was in South Africa when we invited him to come and receive a doctorate, and I was sitting in a comfortable upholstered chair, listening to Frankl standing on the platform and giving this riveting talk of the defiant power of the human spirit that is evoked when we have to do something about a situation or else collapse. And at the end of it, where the whole audience stood up and applauded him for I don't know how long. And this Frankl did, think about it, until his late 80s. And when he died at the age of 92, He had the edition of his book, The Unconscious God, that was rewritten to mean man's search for ultimate meaning, on his breast. And he had lived long in the land for honoring his father and mother and fulfilled his destiny. Isn't that incredible?